Near the end of the first video in this series, I promised that this second video would share knowledge about how to realize healing life axioms, enhance our faith, and encourage more healing flow. That is indeed what I will begin to do in this video. The healing realization of new life axioms has two mutually supportive aspects. These are the healing of suffering and the actual realization of the new life axioms, which are the truths upon which we base our understanding of life. Because life is our essential nature, the natural result of being life is that we cannot avoid realizing new life axioms. Every soul is constantly realizing them. That is the purpose of the cycle of the evolution of life, which is the way the universe works and is organized. So we cannot avoid our new life axioms. However, that is not to say that all souls are equally proficient at realizing them. The more dedicated a soul is to the power ethic, the more they resist their new life axioms. So there is a range of abilities from almost complete resistance to the completely effortless alignment with truth that some call enlightenment. The vast majority of humanity falls somewhere in between, depending on how attached to the power ethic they are and the stage they are at in their exploration of it. In this video, I am going to address the first of the aforementioned aspects. I am going to explain what suffering is and a method I have developed over many years for healing it. If one wants to develop faith real enough and folly wise enough to move metaphorical mountains, then it is vital to understand suffering and how to heal it. That is because suffering is a massive burden that weighs down real faith and confounds wise folly. It is what keeps us enslaved to the power ethic. It is the power ethic's snare. However, I believe that we can be free of it, and in learning how to do that, liberate ourselves into an eternally unburdened state of creative freedom. So let's look at what suffering is and how it can be healed. In doing so, epiphysics can be a great help because, as with the New Age concept of negative thinking that I discussed in part 1 of this series, there are some power ethic compliant concepts out there which can massively frustrate our efforts. Epiphysics can help us sift out the dross and see suffering in a new light. Before we explore an epiphysical understanding of suffering, though, I will briefly summarize some important definitions from part 1 of this series. If you want more depth, watch that video. Here goes. The power ethic, like all other ethics, is a way we attempt to get more of something we value. Effectively, it is a plan that values power and invests what power one has to accrue more, irrespective of whether the method employed is moral or not. Generally, what seems to work best is immorality because accruing power over others is immoral. So the most skillful practitioners of the power ethic are also the most immoral. Ethics can be valid or invalid depending on whether they work or not. The power ethic is actually the most invalid plan possible because it is a very seductive illusion. When we practice it, we are not actually gaining any power at all. In fact, we are abdicating our valid empowerment in an attempt to gain fake power. We are giving our empowerment over to the power ethic itself and thereby enslaving ourselves to it. In order to wield the power we have given away and that which we seem to have accrued via the power ethic, we must continue to practice it with greater and greater dedication. Thus, in the initial stages of a soul's exploration of the power ethic, it encourages them to enslave themselves more and more deeply. Each time we apply the power ethic, we hurt ourselves by accumulating a sense of guilt and shame. Thereby we deepen our suffering. This is a trap, because in order to free ourselves, we must face and heal our suffering. If, however, we don't know how to heal much suffering, we tend to shy away from it and thus bury it in what I call our neglected mind. I call the subconscious our neglected mind because that is a better understanding of it. It only appears to be unavailable to us because we are practiced at neglecting it. If we bury our suffering, it has not gone away. We are still in a state of suffering. We are simply ignoring it in order to be able to cope with our lives, but our denial comes at a cost. We have to devote energy to keep part of our awareness buried. In order to face our suffering and heal it, we need real faith. That is to say, we need to develop our passion for clarity and the resultant courage to seek out the truth. We need to be brave enough to value truth above lies, even when seeing said truths will bring on a painful healing crisis. The quest for such truths is assisted by wise folly, which is an intelligent open-mindedness. So real faith and wise folly can bring us face to face with our suffering, and the question then becomes, can we weather the storm of the resultant healing crisis? The answer is dependent on how well we are able to heal our suffering. So let's proceed to look at that in depth. We all have some ability to heal suffering because healing occurs naturally if nothing is frustrating it, and it can never be frustrated completely. However, the amount of suffering we have buried in our neglected mind limits our ability to heal. Thus, as we accumulate more and more suffering, our ability to heal it becomes weaker and weaker. Why is that so? Because healing necessarily involves feeling, and burying our suffering is done by numbing ourselves to the feelings that remind us of our needs. Thankfully, though, we are alive, and life can never lose the ability to feel entirely. So however large our burden of repressed suffering is, we can always learn how to begin unburdening ourselves. And as we set aside our burden, we regain our ability to set it aside. If we want a better, liberating understanding of suffering, it is helpful to start by exploring the relationship between pain and suffering. Pain and suffering are intimately connected. In fact, they are so intimately connected that they seem to be the same thing a lot of the time. The more intense the pain, the more we tend to suffer with it. However, pain and suffering are not synonymous, and we can learn to heal our pain by divesting it of suffering. The first step is to realize that pain does not equal suffering. I have 3 examples of experiences that I think most people can relate to, and which illustrate my point by shining a little light on the nature of suffering. The first example is a little vulgar. I apologize for that, but we can learn so much from it that it is important to present nevertheless. I imagine that we have all experienced becoming aware of having a full bladder, but the situation has not been convenient, so we have chosen temporarily to deny ourselves relief. In such situations, the longer the lack of convenience persists, the more insistent the urgings become, until they are obviously painful. This shines a light on the nature of pain. It is a signal from the body that a bodily need requires urgent attention lest harm is inflicted. It also shines a light on the nature of suffering when we contemplate how our experience changes as we do eventually find relief. We do not have to wait until the bladder is completely empty to experience relief. In fact, it happens as soon as we begin to pee. In that instant, the pain sensations do not go away, but their character does change. The pain is transformed into a sense of relief by the flow. To the sourness of the pain is added the sweetness of relief. This shows us that whereas pain is a signal of need, suffering is a state where that signal is being ignored. It is a state of denied need, and thus a lack of fulfillment. In spite of what some metaphysical teachers profess, we do have bodily needs, and it is not helpful to deny that fact. It is true that, at an essential level, we are never in a state of need, because serendipity is always working with perfect precision to provide the exact circumstances that are required for the learning experiences that we are choosing. However, we cannot ignore our bodily needs because our bodies are wonderful learning tools with sophisticated fulfillment assessment systems. When we are fulfilling our needs, they reward us with pleasant feedback commensurate with the level and quality of the fulfillment. Conversely, when our bodily needs are being denied, we are alerted to the fact via discomfort and pain in an equally commensurate way. The crucial thing to understand about this is that the wisdom of the intelligence that has been instilled in our human bodies by billions of years of evolution is by necessity an ethical wisdom. So our bodies do a wonderful job of helping us to learn to be more ethical, both in a moral sense and in the prudent sense of successfully achieving fulfillment. So we have seen that suffering is distinct from pain because pain signals need, and suffering only comes about when that need is not acted upon to realize relief. Now, with my second example, we will explore what happens when suffering becomes chronic. If I were to plunge my hand into a bucket of ice water, it would soon become painful, and the pain would increase as long as I denied my body's need by keeping it there. Also, a numbness would begin to develop, and along with that would come a diminished ability to control my hand and perform intricate tasks with it. Eventually, the numbness would become so strong that the pain would seem to go away, and my hand would become totally unusable. If it were not an obvious part of my body, I might eventually forget it existed, which incidentally is what actually happens to our more subjective denied needs. Even though I would no longer be aware of the pain and suffering of my frozen hand, it would not have gone away. I would, in fact, be in a state of severely denied pain and suffering, one which would soon result in frostbite if not reversed. Taking my hand out of the ice water and warming it would gradually bring back feeling and control, and the pain would re-emerge, showing that it had indeed not gone away. This example can teach us a lot about suffering in general, because what is true in this entirely physical example is also true for mental and emotional pain and suffering. So far, the two examples I have presented demonstrate, firstly, that suffering is a state of denied need, and secondly, that if we are unable to rectify the lack on a persistent basis, or due to its overwhelming magnitude, a merciful anesthetizing numbness makes us oblivious to it. In other words, the pain gets repressed, yet the suffering remains, held in escrow in our neglected mind, along with the pain which signals the lack. Despite the fact that the numbness makes us unable to act to fulfill the need, it is indeed merciful, and it also has another important function, which is demonstrated by my third example. We can see clearly that pain and suffering are not exactly the same thing when we contemplate instances when a hand or leg has gone to sleep. I don't know about you, but when that happens to me, there is no sensation that might be called pain. Yet if I am too vigorous with my efforts to wake the sleeping limb up, the sensations are full of suffering. The intense semi-numbness and lack of proper feedback is an extremely horrid experience. From that, we can learn something else that is very important about suffering. It reveals a dynamic that applies to all healing, because healing is about wholeness. When part of us is numb, there is effectively a split that needs to be made whole. However, if we seek to force an awakening, we can be overwhelmed with an intense revelation of the denied suffering. We have to be gentle and patient in our efforts to heal it. Our bodies have intelligent defense systems which act to protect us from reckless self-inflicted force. There is a saying which I think is attributable to Carl Jung. What we resist persists. It is true, but on its own it is not very helpful, and can in fact result in the infliction of more suffering. That is because the part of us that is resisting is often a very wise inner defender. I have found that resistance is often the result of another part of us trying to force the resolution of our suffering. So I have added my own phrase to Carl's. What we resist persists, and what we attack fights back. This highlights the fact that underlying all suffering is an attempt to apply the power ethic. When we are fearful of our new life axioms and closed-minded in our lack of real faith and wise folly, we often try to cheat the cycle of the evolution of life. We try to get the fruits of the new axioms without putting in the work to realize them. In other words, we attempt to force life to comply with our personal ideas of how things should be. That, however, is impossible. Such efforts are invalid. They are ineffective and thus inevitably result in a need going unfulfilled. Often, such self-inflicted violence can become a vicious circle. The vicious circle starts with us judging a creative pointer as wrong, instead of being willing to explore the possibility that it may be our current understanding that is in error. This can lead us to see our serendipitous blessings as bad and use force to attack them. That inevitably causes us pain, which warns us of our error. Often, though, we react by increasing our estimation of the badness. Then our reaction becomes more forceful and results in more pain, etc., etc. Obviously, this vicious circle could build indefinitely. In its infinite wisdom, life has evolved numbness as a dampener to limit our foolish self-inflicted violence. As we inflict more suffering upon ourselves in our invalid attempts to fulfill a need, numbness eventually makes us oblivious to it. Then we act as if we no longer have the need. Well, consciously at least. At a subconscious level, we are constantly trying to fulfill the need in unreal symbolic ways. The need and suffering hasn't gone away, and we still have to waste energy keeping it in our neglected mind, but at least the feedback that was magnifying the conflict has been aborted. Now that I have explained what suffering is, we can proceed to look at how we can apply this knowledge to heal it. The key is to realize that violent forcing is the root of the problem. Not all force is violence. Force that is aligned with life is aligned with our needs. It is effortless and serves to increase our fulfillment. Force that is counter to truth, however, is in conflict with our needs. It is violence because it violates our needs. Although it often plays out externally to one extent or another, ultimately the external is only a reminder of an inner conflict. It highlights ways in which we are at war with ourselves internally. This does not just block our new, deeper fulfillment. In war, there is hardship because resources that would provide for established needs get diverted into the war effort, and that wastage creates a chronic situation of lack. So in order to heal the suffering, we need to identify the self-inflicted violence and stop it. Simply stopping the violent forcing will lead to a resolution of the conflict, because it is the violence that necessitates an opposing force from our defenses. This is why I say that Carl's phrase is not helpful on its own. If we are aware that what we resist persists, without understanding the key role of violent force in establishing the resistance, then we can easily fall into the mistaken use of violent force in order to try to stop ourselves from resisting. This only increases the conflict, because the resistance is there not to resist the healing we are seeking to achieve, but the self-inflicted violence. So the resistance will increase to match the new level of violence. In this way, we deepen our wounds, contrary to our healing intentions. Violent forcing is an attempt to apply the power ethic, and I have already explained in my 2 previous power ethic videos why it is invalid, i.e. that it doesn't work. Ironically, all conflicts, inner and outer, are like this. Both sides have the intention of realizing deeper fulfillment. It is just that they disagree about how to go about it. They both have a limited conception of the situation, seeing only part of the whole picture. So they remain stuck and frozen like the ice water example, butting heads because they are not seeing a unifying new axiom. It only requires one party to stop being violent to resolve the conflict. Everyone wants to feel fulfilled, because feeling fulfilled is the wise scoring system instilled in our bodies by billions of years of evolution. Both sides of our inner conflict are trying to feel fulfilled, in other words, to feel good. So they both have good intentions. However, consciously, we are not aware of the pain and suffering that we are numb to. All that we are aware of is that there is a lack, and we have habitual ways of trying to address it, ways which don't work because they are violent. Our defense system is only too aware of our pain, and that the forcing is trying to push us into it, thus it resists. Both of these actions are ignorant of a key truth, however. Feeling good is not necessarily about arranging the right circumstances. Most people believe that it is and act accordingly. However, in order to point out our new life axioms, serendipity often arranges circumstances that challenge our old understanding. In such circumstances, reacting from our old understanding becomes practicing the power ethic. Such efforts are ignorant of truth and thus doomed to frustration. Serendipity never denies us fulfillment in this way. She is, in fact, enabling us to experience a deeper fulfillment, if we are willing. She is always blessing us, but we need to have the right attitude to accept her blessings. When she offers us the realization of a challenging new axiom, it often seems to be wrong according to our current understanding of life. It is then that we need to have sufficient open-mindedness, i.e. wise folly, to at least entertain the possibility that it is our understanding that is wrong, not the new truth that is being pointed out. Such an attitude can help us see the situation as a mystery. Entertaining a mystery can be very enjoyable. It can feed our passion to find the answer, i.e. our real faith. When we seek and find the answer, we have found a new life axiom. This is how the evolution of life works. When we comprehend it properly, we know that feeling good is not necessarily about circumstances. It is about how good we are at feeling our circumstances. That ability is what can enable us to heal our repressed suffering. Developing the ability to feel our challenging circumstances enables us to unburden ourselves of our pain and suffering, and ultimately break the chains of our enslavement to the power ethic. So how do we do that? I will describe the practice I have developed. First, though, an obligatory disclaimer. I am not a therapist and cannot give therapeutic advice. I am sharing my practice here merely as information. An epiphysical view of life recognizes that we are all responsible for our own reality, and that healing one's suffering is a way to own that responsibility. So if you want to try my method for yourself, you do so under your own responsibility. That is not to say that I see it as dangerous. However, practicing it properly can ease the way for upsets lodged in the neglected mind to emerge and be healed. It can encourage a grieving process, which is often uncomfortable. The whole point of the technique is to develop the ability to ease our denied needs out of the shadows of the neglected mind in a gentle and loving manner, so that they are easier to heal by realizing the new life axioms that will resolve them. When we do the process well, pain is transformed into relief, and we are not thrust into our suffering too forcefully, as in the example of the sleeping limb. However, proficiency comes with practice, and developing it takes time. This is why it is wise to be as gentle as possible with oneself. It is prudent to be patient as we learn this skill of surrendering the habit of self-inflicted violence. In part 3 of this series, I will share my method for teasing painful truths out of the neglected mind to be realized and thus healed. When one does that, it helps greatly to be able to allow one's feelings to flow. In other words, to be good at feeling by learning how to transform one's suffering into relief. So now let's proceed to a description of my method for doing that. My method for healing suffering is based upon the understanding that all inner conflicts are held in place by being fed with disharmonious energy. We are constantly feeding them with this energy as a result of acting on various habitual ways of trying to force ourselves to feel good. These habits have become a kind of unnatural second nature to us, and we are usually almost completely unaware we are doing them. However, we are never completely oblivious to them. Thus, turning our attention to the effects they are having is a way to uncover our surface level of forcing. This surface level can be made conscious by paying attention to it, and thus we can stop doing it. When we give up the surface level of self-inflicted violence, our defenses have less reason to resist, and that enables the flow of feeling. This will unravel our inner conflict like pulling on a loose strand of knitting, only it is done not by pulling or any forcing at all, but by giving up the struggle to feel. It is what Taoists call wu-wei, doing without doing. When one becomes practiced at the method, it can be done at any time, but I find it to be much easier when there are no distractions. My preference is to do my practice whilst lying in bed in the morning. Going to bed early, one can arrange to have an hour or more in the morning after one awakens. When we wake from sleep, we are closer to our feelings than usual, which also makes things easier. I lie on my back with my legs bent and the soles of my feet planted on the bed so that my spine is aligned comfortably. Then I gently allow my breathing to become very subtle. I recently found out that this is a form of meditation which encourages the emergence of sensations. But the primary reason why I have always done it is that I found normal breathing distracting. Once I am as relaxed as is deliberately possible, I then begin to scan the sensations in my body for any signs of discomfort, tension, or stuckness. It is important to bear in mind that the whole method is about letting go of forcing, not adding to it. So if one is unable deliberately to relax fully, that is not an obstacle. In fact, it means that I am already aware of the stuckness I am aiming to release and don't need to scan for it. Now all that is required to release the surface level of forcing is to pay attention to it. However, that is not as easy as it sounds, which is the reason why there is a skill to be developed over time. One big aspect of the skill to be developed is that I often find that I need to remind myself not to try to force myself to stop forcing. If I am finding that the stuckness is not releasing, the habit of trying to make it release can kick in. That is a mistake. Whenever the stuckness is not releasing, the reason is always that I am trying to force it in some way that I am not yet fully aware of. This is where a few important insights I have had over the years can help. Firstly, I have found that if there is pain, it is not helpful to focus on it too closely. Pain that is not being healed by flow is a source of tension. Pain is not stuckness, but is always generated by the conflicting force that is stuckness. So I seek out the stuckness and do my best to let the pain be. The sensations in one's body are like an orchestra, and just like listening to music, one's attention can be focused where one wills it to be. So we can focus on the drums or the violins or any other instrument, or we can back off and broaden our attention to the whole of the music. Scanning one's body is the same. With practice, one can learn to allow the music to draw attention to where attention is required. Secondly, there is something very important to comprehend about numb or fuzzy sensations. For decades, I have suffered with chronic candidiasis. It has been a vital learning tool for me, which has helped me develop the understanding I am sharing here. I say suffered with it, not from it, because it has not been the cause of the resultant suffering. That was due to my reaction to it. My candidiasis has had the effect of numbing my whole body and fogging my mental processes. I call it my fuzz, and I used to see it as an enemy that was preventing me from being able to heal by numbing my ability to feel. Now I see it in a much different light because of an insight I had about 15 years ago. It is not fuzziness that blocks feeling. It may very well seem so because of its anesthetic effect, but I have already explained the blessings of that. Where we choose to place our attention is a fire that shines a light on what is there. Imagine the sun breaking through the clouds and shining down on a frozen mountain top that is shrouded in mist. If the sun were to imagine that it needed to melt the ice and snow right now, it would probably see the mist as an obstruction. After all, the brighter the sunlight, the more the mist would shine, appearing to be in the way. Thankfully, though, forcing is not something the sun does. Firstly, it shines on the mist, which melts away, and then it shines on the ice and snow. This is what is required if fuzzy numbness seems to be blocking one's ability to feel. It is always what we have before us now that requires our attention, and if that is fuzz, then fuzz is what we need to pay attention to. That brings me to a third insight. Often what drives our actions is our perception of the situation and where we would like it to go. This can be a very subtle source of forcing. If I fall into the habit of imagining that my task is to resolve my stuckness by inducing healing flow, that very thought takes me into an imaginary future and away from the way the sensations are in the now. This comes from a lack of patience and a desire to make things flow. As the saying goes, infinite patience achieves instant results. Or to put that another way, perfect impatience means perpetual frustration. That is very applicable to this practice. When I find myself looking to how I would like things to be in the future, I say to myself, no, for now I am going to just let things be as they are and pay attention to that. Often that is all that is required to enable the stuckness to release. This takes me to the fourth insight. Paying attention to one's sensations can be assisted by thoughts that draw one's attention to the key sensations and help one to develop a clear perception of them. We can see why this is so by contemplating the cycle of the elements. The process I have been describing works via the cycle of the evolution of life. Indeed, the whole universe does, and it is especially helpful to understand how that is relevant here. The cycle of the evolution of life is composed of 3 elemental cycles that work in sequence to bring to the surface a deeper elemental cycle. Because that is so, we simply need to see how to work with the cycle of the elements to get a helpful perspective. In the animation that is playing, the fire element represents our creative choices. These give rise to the earth element, which represents the reality we have created and the sense we make of it via our senses. Processing our senses gives rise to the air element, which represents the intelligent distillation of our sensory data into our perceptions. It is important to see that this is an indispensable step between earth and water. There is a puzzle in the fact that both the earth and water elements involve feeling. Earth involves feeling because we feel our sensations, and even the senses that we don't feel directly cause bodily sensations that we do feel. To my mind, water is a far better allegory for feeling, but if so, then the cycle seems to imply that there are two kinds of feeling, which I don't think is true. So what is going on with these two elements, both representing feeling? The answer is that water represents felt knowing, which is made apparent by flow. It doesn't bring in a new type of feeling, it simply brings flow to the sensations that we already do feel. In so doing, it emphasizes truth, because it is only when we have clear perceptions from the air element that our watery felt knowing will flow. This enables us to use our feeling flow as a measure of how well we are doing with our healing practice. The suffering stuck in our neglected mind is very much like the example of the full bladder, only it is shrouded in numbness. As we melt the mists away with our attention, the ice and snow eventually emerges too, and we can melt it away also. The misty numb sensations are not different from the stuck tense ones in this regard. They are all sensations that we can pay attention to and dissolve. Watery feeling flow signals our success. When we take our attention to the key place, it resolves any misperceptions that may be driving the stuck inner conflict, and the feelings begin to flow. The relief and the way that the character of the sensations change is very much like the bladder example. It is indicative of the resolution of old denied need. Thankfully, the old denied needs stuck in one's neglected mind are not current needs. The only need we have now with regard to them is to allow them to heal by paying attention to them and thus evoking feeling flow. Thus we divest ourselves of the burden of having to try to fulfill them in unconscious symbolic ways in the present. They are now an unreal, illusory need. We don't need to fulfill them in the present, but we waste energy trying to until we shine the light of our conscious awareness upon them, and thus put them in the past where they belong. As I said, certain thoughts can help us focus our light where it is required. We are synesthetic beings, which means that we can use various senses as allegories for other senses. It can help us to focus our attention if we do this with the sensations we are exploring. I often describe to myself what the sensation is like. If it were a taste or a smell, what would it be? Is it hard, soft, sharp, blunt, etc.? Can I think of an image that would describe it? Such thoughts help to bring one's attention to how it feels in the now, but it is well to be aware that getting overly drawn into mental descriptions can start to be a counterproductive distraction. Also, if I find that a sense of stuckness is not shifting after having been patient with it for a reasonable amount of time, then it is probably because something else less obvious needs attention first. So I broaden my attention and simply pay attention to the subtle sensations of aliveness that permeate my whole body. I rest in them like a feather bed, which helps to highlight numb, fuzzy sensations because they are soft and fluffy themselves. Often, when things are not flowing, I find that I am paying attention to a mental construct that is composed of memories of past sensations which are only being hinted at in the present. In such cases, I ask myself, what is actually there? And sensing the answer usually results in flow. Finally, when releases happen, they can flow well for a prolonged time, or they can be very brief with very little apparent flow. Obviously, one prefers the quality prolonged flow, but that is achieved by being gentle and loving with oneself. So if flow is brief and or weak, it is usually because old habits of forcing kick in and a counterproductive habit-driven attempt to increase the flow happens. What works is to allow the flow to be what it is, even if it is only a trickle. For me, releases are often accompanied by involuntary motions which stretch out the tension. I believe that they are a form of pandiculation. Again, these can be distinguished from forcing because they are accompanied by the relief of feeling flow. Every sensation that we pay attention to has some flow to it, and will shift if we are not inadvertently adding counterproductive force. When one pays attention to the tension and thus becomes aware of such force, it has become conscious and can be let go of. One must be careful not to try to force the release beyond what is ready to release. One has to be patient and satisfied with the flow that happens naturally. In that way, a lot of progress can be made, and one can learn to just relax into it. I think I have covered the essentials now. As I said, if you choose to try this healing practice, you do so on your own responsibility. I have done my best to share my own insights, but we all must learn our skills for ourselves. No one can do our learning for us. As in all things, it is important to be kind, gentle, and patient with ourselves when seeking to heal our wounds. In the next video in this series, I will build upon this healing method by explaining how to tease our new life axioms out of the shadows of our neglected mind. Allowing our feelings to flow is very helpful, but ultimately healing depends on the realization of key truths. So the method I have shared here and the one I will share in the next installment work hand in glove as a complete method. That is all for now. Thank you for your attention.